Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back finally with a brand new series. Took me a little bit to get through some of the other series, but we are here and we are ready to go with a brand new Deku What If. What if Deku was the reincarnation of Piccolo? Normally, I don't even do reincarnation stuff. I'm not even a big fan of reincarnation stuff, but I thought this would be fun. I've been really wanting to do something new with Piccolo, especially with the fact that Piccolo is one of my favorite characters in Dragon Ball. I do have a Dragon Ball channel. I don't post on it. I'm gonna be blunt. I haven't found the will to post on that channel. Dragon Ball What Ifs is a lot more effort in terms of editing, at least if you want them to do well. So I'm just not about that. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have someone to edit for me, at least those Dragon Ball videos, on a consistent basis. So I just don't do it. Maybe one day we'll go back to it, but for now I have other projects in the future that I'm looking towards. So, but with that said, let's focus back on the brand new What If, the last Namekian, Izuku Midoriya. So if y'all enjoy, make sure to leave a like, a sub, and a comment down below, all that good stuff. And also check the links in the description below. I'm sure there's something in there that you guys should check out. I also have a membership, so if you guys want early videos, same with a brand new tier as well, called, I believe it's called the Golden Commanders or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, that's about it. And I hope y'all enjoy, and let's just get right into the what if. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya was born in a very unusual way. Izuku was born from the energy and power of a vessel that many did not know of. He was brought upon this world because of a whole different idea and a whole different universe. Back in another universe, there was a Namekian, the last known Namekian, at least at that time, and more Namekians would eventually grow and eventually spread out throughout the world. But he was known as a Namekian that was all-powerful, one of the Dragon Warrior clan, combined with various other clans through the absorption technique that Namekians have. His power would build up throughout the years, through years and years of training and hard labor. Piccolo, the one we know, the green monster himself, Piccolo from Namek, would eventually grow to power that was universal. He would believe that one day he would pass on, that one day he would die. So he decided to spit out an egg that many, would know as the future Piccolo. But the only thing is, this egg was far different. It seemed when this egg was spit out by Piccolo, let's just say, it didn't go exactly how he thought it would. This egg was special. It would transcend universes and basically turn into a spirit itself, a soul you can think of, and that soul would arrive one day at Izuku Midoriya's doorstep. And when Izuku Midoriya would come about, the soul of that being that Piccolo spit out would go within her son. Years would pass on, Izuku would be born, and Izuku would be different than many others. Insane strength, insane regeneration. It was odd. He would break tables on accident when he was just a child. Small cuts he would get would regenerate in seconds. Izuku would be so different. But during this time, his quirk began to manifest. Or at least that's what they began to think it was. It wasn't exactly a quirk though, it was far different. His skin would start growing this light shade of green, but it seems like it was controllable. Izuku would sometimes focus really hard and the green would go away. But when he would allow the green to absorb his body entirely, his skin would become thicker, become different. It would feel as if he could stretch his limbs around houses, around buildings, around countries, it would feel sometimes. This is how he felt when he was in this green form. Antennas of some sorts would grow on his head, and he would look like the green Piccolo we know so much and know so well. The last Namekian is now here on planet Earth, but in a society that is far different than the one he would have been in an entirely different universe. Izuku Midoriya, at the age of about 5, would have struggles with controlling, basically turning into this quote-unquote green monster. At least that's what that would be referenced as when all the kids would bully him or be terrified of him. Nonetheless, Izuku would sit on his couch and watch his television, looking at the one and only number 1 hero, All Might. That's all he cared about. That's all he could think about. How could he eventually become the number 1 hero? Protect everyone. Save everyone. That's the goal of Izuku Midoriya, and that's going to be the goal of the last Namekian. Izuku would go throughout his years trying to stay looking like everybody else, but quickly at the age of 10 to 12 he would realize something, that it didn't matter anymore, that the true form that he needed to be in was the one that everyone feared, was the one that truly made him powerful. So he began to live in that form, getting used to his strength. Of course, he wouldn't be insanely powerful off the bat. Of course, he would probably break simple stools, tables, stuff like that, just like he did when he was younger. But he knew that there were more, and there was more to being this so-called Namekian. He's been told by his doctors and told by everyone, every specialist he can possibly find, that it's just some sort of strength enhancement, regenerative type of quirk. But Izuku knows that it's more, that there has to be more. He can sense it. When he's in this form, his knowledge would advance, and he can sense and tell that there's more to it than just, well, something simple as, oh, you're stronger and you're more durable. It's more to it than just that. The knowledge he senses is one that he realizes that there were people just like him, ones that grew up on a planet by the name of Namek. Izuku would speak to his mother about this, but every record book, everything, they couldn't find a word about it. Everything about space would have nothing about this so-called other planet. Izuku would feel as if there were nothing about people like him. Nonetheless, though, Izuku would begin to train at the age of 12, beginning to actually learn and get a grip for his power. As time would pass on, the stronger he would get. He would realize that his power broadened just beyond his strength enhancement and regenerative powers. He could basically stretch out his limbs, grow his body. On top of that, he could control something that he wouldn't know is known as ki, but would know as a power that is basically this flashy blast, explosions, everything that he can use, controlling and manipulating this ki within his body without even knowing that's exactly what it is. Izuku would begin to learn how to use this from 13 to 14 to now 15 years old. Izuku has been gaining and getting stronger throughout this entire time. A connection with something that he doesn't even know really even exists in a different plane of a universe. Izuku would begin to learn more and more, or gain more and more knowledge from seemingly nowhere. It seems that he now knows that he's known as a Namekian, or at least some hybrid version of one. A Namekian that basically doesn't even need food, just water. While in this form, he realizes this relatively quickly. Izuku, of course, now that he's older, he has become more comfortable literally in his skin. Izuku has realized that it doesn't really matter what these other people think, and that his strength is all that truly matters in the large grand scheme of things. Of course, his goal is to become the #1 hero. That means becoming the strongest hero he possibly can right now. And that means obviously going to the one and only UA. Toward the end of his school year, obviously being at the age of 15 and the end of his middle school, he begins to listen to the teacher as he explains that he was going to hand out some career aptitude test, but he already knows that, well, they all want to go the hero route. He throws the papers in the sky, and Izuku is just listening to everything as the teacher explains. The teacher even regards Izuku as a possible candidate for, well, being a part or getting a chance at a good hero school, maybe even UA. Bakugo would begin to say that he's going to be the only person out of this crappy school to actually get into UA, and that if anyone thinks otherwise, they're just stupid. The teacher, though, of course, doesn't listen to the students and knows that Izuku is pretty strong. He's seen it, and he's actually spoken to his mother, Inko Midoriya, about why he stays in the form that he's in. After learning about it, he doesn't really argue with it. He doesn't really deem it as if Izuku is using his quirk. That's just who Izuku is now. So he takes that into account, and he's seen the efforts that Izuku has made in terms of just seeing him work in gym class and stuff like that. He's been taking things very seriously. Any teacher with a common sense or just, a brain in general would see this out of a child. Izuku would continue listening and would listen as Bakugo would blast the table right in front of him. The teacher would tell Bakugo to calm down and not to use his quirk as he's doing so. And the other students argue that Izuku is as well, but the teacher thinks that, he's always been doing this, and that doesn't give an excuse for Bakugo to try and blow him up. Nonetheless, Izuku would continue throughout the class, and eventually the school day would be over. Izuku would then be heading out, grabbing all his stuff, and Bakugo would grab him by the arm and immediately pressure him, saying that he should just basically take his own life, saying that he should jump off the top of the building and that he wouldn't amount to anything. Izuku then says that even if he did jump off the top of the building, he wouldn't die. He would just, hover right before he landed flat on his face. Izuku would break free of Bakugo's grip, and relatively easily at that, walking out and leaving Bakugo kinda speechless. Did Izuku just say he could fly? Well, sort of. He can kind of hover. He's not really very good at flying just quite yet, but he's going to learn and basically try to channel this so-called ki over this next course of the 10 months. Izuku would head off and begin basically leaving, and as he does, he heads under this bridge. And when he heads through the bridge, he begins writing notes about his power, Bakugo's power, any powers he's really seen, any quirks he's really seen. Because of course, that is the Izuku we all know and love. He begins to study and basically learn more things as he moves, and the brain of a Namekian, or the brain of himself in this form, is allowing him to basically figure out so many different things that he would have never known when he was younger. Ever since he's basically channeled this Namekian side of himself, he's been learning more and more, and faster at that. Anything that he would learn in school, he would pick up almost instantaneously, and he begins to learn more and more wisdom, or just gains more and more wisdom from basically the Namekian knowledge that was in his so-called past. Izuku would continue on through this bridge though, and noises would begin to be heard underneath the ground. He begins to get confused and a little bit taken back, but he continues to walk as the manhole cover beneath him blows open. A giant sludge villain would then show up out of nowhere, mocking toward Izuku and telling him that he needs his body. Immediately, Izuku would take into action, stretching out his arm and slinging himself the opposite direction, knowing that he shouldn't be fighting this so-called sludge villain. He immediately grabs the top of a building, sending himself up and sitting on the very top as he watches the sludge villain try and come after him. Izuku would then jump over the sludge villain as he climbs up the building and goes right past it, running back underneath the bridge. Just as he does this, the sludge villain chases back. But just as Izuku goes past that manhole cover, someone else appears beneath, or basically coming from beneath the ground, screaming, "One Detroit Smash!" Immediately when he does this, Izuku knows exactly who this is. Seeing the sludge villain get blasted everywhere, he's completely stunned, but at the same time excited. That is the one and only All Might. He runs over toward All Might and begins to ask a bunch of questions. All Might is kind of taken back by the form that Izuku is in, but let's be honest, there are some creepy and weird looking people in My Hero Academia, so this doesn't really bother him that much. He does ask about what Izuku's quirk is and what exactly it entails. He basically explains that he's known as the last Namekian of some sorts. He begins to explain most aspects, but it kind of flies over All Might's head. He doesn't really understand it much, but he does say that with a quirk like that, Izuku can definitely become a very powerful hero. And Izuku asks if there's a chance that maybe he could become the #1 hero. And All Might says that with the right mentality and the right training, he could definitely become the #1 hero. He asks for Izuku's help to basically absorb clean up the sludge villain, putting him in a bottle and in multiple bottles and stuff like that. And Izuku would watch as All Might jumps away, and he sees that All Might, while he wasn't paying attention, signed in his notebook just in big writing All Might, which that's not really a signature, but hey, he'll take what he can get. He begins to head home to his mother, and in complete excitement, telling her about everything that just happened. Yeah, he was attacked by a villain, so that does kind of worry her, but at the same time, he got an autograph from All Might. All Might saved him. He learned that he could be the #1 hero from the #1 hero himself. This makes Izuku completely motivated to train, get stronger. That's all he wants to do now. That's all he can think about. The warrior clan side of Izuku's Namekian is definitely showing. Definitely this want and will to just win and get stronger is something Izuku is making very prevalent. And Inko, obviously Izuku's mother, says that she will give him whatever means necessary to basically allow him to do that. And this is the first start, showing him a gym membership and also other places he can go to get a nice spar in, boxing places, jiu-jitsu places, anything like that to sharpen up his skills. From what she's seen, he can learn how to box and learn how to basically grapple with people from just watching it on TV. So what can he do in a real life scenario? That must be insanely basically beneficial for him. So Izuku would take full advantage. Of course, he would get weird looks at the gym sometimes, but when he would head over to the boxing gym and also jiu-jitsu gyms and judo gyms and anything you can think of, Muay Thai, everything, they wouldn't actually give him weird looks. They would think of him as a martial artist. That's what he wanted to be. He wanted to get stronger, he wanted to be better at fighting, and they respected that entirely out of him. So they would teach him as much as he possibly could, and quickly Izuku would get better than most of these people, but would also have to hold back on his pure strength. They would tell him this in the very beginning, that he needs to learn technique, not brute force. And of course, Izuku didn't really know much of a difference between this, and once he begins to learn technique, they explained, he'll be able to combine that with brute force and become a very powerful martial artist. So Izuku would begin to learn restraint. For about 5 to 6 months, that's all he does. Learning more martial arts and stuff like that, learning these techniques, picking them up almost instantly. Immediately, if he's taught a certain leg sweep, if he's taught a certain way to take someone down, if he's taught a certain combination, he practically learns it in a matter of minutes. And not just learns it, he basically masters it, learning how to do these techniques flawlessly. Izuku would outgrow the gym relatively quickly, but he would promise to come back if he learned anything new and maybe if he could teach them something in return. Of course, they would say that there is no owing or there is no debt in martial arts, but they'll take what they can get if he learns something new. Izuku is happy to hear this and begins to head off to the gym once again and just find an open place, maybe a nice beach. And that's what he ends up finding. He finds a nice beach so he can just run, train, and not many people would even be around, so it'd be pretty easy for him to just, warm up and get ready. Izuku would continue this training and feel that his power is just more and more creeping on itself. It seems like he's getting stronger, his flight is getting better, his ki control is getting way better, and he can actually use small ki blasts now. Izuku would continue this training for months on end, and he would begin to learn more and more about the Namekians. Of course he knew about the whole warrior clan, But as he's gotten stronger, it seems like more and more information has entered his mind. This idea, this wish granting type of clan, supposedly they are able to make dragons. Izuku begins to think that there's no way he can make a dragon. He must be some specific Namekian. Maybe he's some just warrior Namekian. I mean, he's always been gifted and with pure strength, so it wouldn't make sense for him to be able to do something like that, right? He's not so sure. He has so little information, and maybe he'll never get information like that. But we'll never know until, well, the near future. Izuku continues his training, continues his studying, everything you can possibly think of to prepare for UA. And Izuku would eventually have a little bit of extra free time just to relax. A week before the UA exam, he decides that he'll do some studying here and there, but he wants to rest his body because he's been going crazy with how much training he's been doing. Even implementing some weighted vests and also some cool little gear that he found from the store to add to his training. He basically puts weights on top of him to make his training a little bit harder and also give him some more, well, strength in return. Izuku would finally creep toward the day of the UA exam, the final or the first exam for the rest of his life. Frankly, this exam means the world to Izuku. Inko would drive him over there, drop him off, and wish her child good luck, because this means so much to them, to him, and his entire life from here on out. That's a lot of pressure on a kid, and frankly, that's kind of how this world is, and Izuku has realized this from the wisdom and intelligence of basically being a Namekian. Izuku would approach the UA, or the UA entrance, and he would look to his right and look to his left to see multiple kids, or tons of them, basically coming into the UA entrance exam. This is wild to him. He's never seen so many people, and they must all be gifted to the point that they all have a chance. And they're not even really looking at him oddly. But just as he walks into the area and walks through the front door, he would realize that the eyes would eventually get to him, and they would realize that he looks very odd, weird, but nonetheless, he didn't really care. He's used to it. But as he sat down, he sat right next to the one and only Bakugo himself, and that's where his seat was. Unfortunately, he would have to deal with Bakugo for a little bit, but he's been dealing with him all his life, so, I mean, what's a couple more minutes so that they can get to testing? President Mike would then be in front of everybody and begin to basically speak to everybody. What up, listeners? Everybody, get ready for the first portion of the exam. He would then explain that the exam, well, obviously they have to start with a written one, sending them all to a different room. Once they enter that said room, they take the test, and Izuku passes with flying colors, frankly finishing very quickly. Everything was very simple for him. The only problem is he kind of had to get multiple pens and pencils because he kept breaking them. Frankly, his hands are kind of freakish and he's extremely strong, so he kind of snapped a couple of them in half, but hey, that's beyond the point, right? Izuku would finish the test, and to him, he believed that he passed relatively easily on that regard, and began to think about what the practical exam would entail. Eventually, President Mike would have everybody enter the big auditorium once again, and he would explain to everybody what it would entail. And it basically had a bunch of robots. 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer, and then obviously we have the 0-pointer, but that is something to completely ignore. Immediately, Tenya Ida would stand up and basically would say that President Mike didn't even explain the 0-pointer because, well, that was before he even got the chance. And of course, oh, he's just being annoying. And he would even point out how Izuku is being distracting with some of the stuff he's been saying to himself, basically trying to analyze what is to come. Izuku then wraps his arm around Tenya Ida by stretching it out, sitting him back to the chair, and tells him to not interrupt President Mike again, and that he wasn't even bothering anybody. And the only person that really was bothering people was him. Izuku would then listen to President Mike, finish his explanation, and they would head out to the gates to get ready for the practical exam. The practical exam is where everything will change. this means, or this will show how strong Izuku currently is. He hasn't really been able to fight people or really destroy or test his limits here, so this will be a good chance. He begins to wait for it to swing open, and just as it does, he goes flying out of it. Yes, he hasn't mastered flying, so he's not going to be able to fully control flying up, down, all around, but he can definitely fly straight and hover at a small like height. So he'll be able to just fly out insanely quick and go immediately to some of these robots. Flying straight through them, he can feel that his strength is far enough to destroy a ton of these. He shoots ki blasts and punches through multiple. He begins to destroy one after another with relative ease, and eventually he'd feel pretty confident about what he's done so far. He begins to just look at his hands and move his arms and feels good. He's never felt like this before. Fighting makes him excited. Yes, he's done some combat, boxing, stuff like that, but that's different when you have to hold back. Of course, it is fun to an extent, but he's not holding back here. He's punching through robots as much as he wants, and he's smashing through them with relative ease. So he's a happy person right now, happy to see that all of his training has definitely paid off. And even with the weighted clothing he has on right now, it's pretty easy. And nobody even knows that he would be about one step slower because of this weighted clothing. That's the funny part. Eventually, he would kind of, destroy a couple more robots to ensure that he would get into UA, but he would be happy with the fact that he feels pretty confident. But just as he is pretty confident, he sees a robot, a giant one, a 0-pointer come out of the woodworks, and he would realize that maybe he should just head off and see if there's anybody that needs to get out. But he doesn't see anybody until it's actually a little too late. He hears a scream come from a girl, and he hears it with his big ears, obviously, and he flies over. He begins to push all the rubble off, and he's going to grab her and just run her away. But just as he's about to, he sees that there's a giant foot above him. He punches toward the foot, and it's able to stagger back the 0-pointer relatively well. Grabbing the girl and flying with her off, putting her back down, he sees the 0-pointer walk over, and he decides that since the 0-pointer didn't fall to one punch, he wants to try something out. Izuku would then put his pinky on his pinky and all the fingers to follow. His fingers would be basically touching each other, and he'd make kind of a weird circle. In fact, he'd begin to basically focus all his energy to that said circle, and he'd focus all of his power, all of his ki. Light would begin to grow, and more light would begin to disperse from his hands and also within this ball of energy. Just as the 0-pointer walks toward him, all of the teachers watch on in complete, basically awe or just intrigue. What is this kid doing? What kind of quirk does he have? All Might, Aizawa, they're all interested in what he's about to do, and Izuku would release his hands and scream 2 words: Light Grenade. Immediately, this giant explosion would erupt from his hands, but it would incinerate the monster or the giant robots, but he would take a knee immediately. Okay, I thought that would tire me out, but damn, that just took so much out of me. He gets back up relatively easily, grabbing the girl and helping her to recovery girl, but now he knows that he's not quite ready to use that technique in a practical situation. Yeah, this might be a quote-unquote practical exam, but let's be honest, robots are not practical. And if he's going against someone that is stronger than that robot, that light grenade ain't gonna be very good when he's on the ground gasping for air. And even he knows that, so he tries to keep that in mind, but he never has gotten to use it against an opponent like that. So it does tell him his limitations in terms of his ki. In terms of pure strength, he probably would have been able to just beat up the robot relatively easily, but he did want to use some of his ki. That's kind of like the core power. If he elevates his ki, elevates his strength through ki, he should be able to basically close any gap between any villain if he basically does what he needs to do and with proper training. Izuku would then make sure that the girl's good, and Recovery Girl would say that she's just fine. She then introduces herself as Ochako Uraka, and He says that his name is Izuku Midoriya. He's surprised that the girl's not saying anything about his appearance, and Recovery Girl isn't either. He asks them about this, and they say that there are a lot of people out there that look far different, and what is she to complain when he just saved her? Izuku smiles slightly and thanks her for basically that conversation. Izuku would then head off, relatively confident, actually no, like almost guaranteeing himself that he's going to get into UA. He would arrive back at home, and Inko, his mother obviously, would congratulate him on a job well done, and Izuku would explain some of the downfalls that he's found out. Inko would immediately tell him to not be so hard on himself. He's still a kid, and he's going to be a first-year hero student. A student. Not some certified pro hero already. Nonetheless, it's finally about to begin. And the true hero journey would eventually begin for Izuku right when he gets a very special letter. A special letter from UA with basically a small hologram chip within it. He opens it up to see the one and only All Might himself. All Might begins to speak about how good Izuku did. Actually so good that he broke every record, and that he is the #1 student in the entrance exam. And not only that, well, he thought about what he said, about what Izuku said. There truly is a really good chance that Izuku Midoriya, and All Might points toward basically the camera, that Izuku Midoriya can be the #1 hero right when he gets out of high school. Izuku has shown the potential of basically pro hero level power, and as he grows throughout UA, well, he'll continue to show that potential. All Might gives a thumbs up and tells Izuku that when he's ready, UA is waiting, and the hologram closes. Izuku looks toward his mother, and his mother smiles at him, and a smile begins to grow on his face. This truly is the next step, and well, the journey is finally about to begin for Izuku Midoriya to become the #1 hero. But that is for another part. If you enjoyed What If Deku Was the Reincarnation of Piccolo, make sure to leave a like, a sub, and a comment down below. All that good stuff. Check the links in the description below. And as always, show some love the best you possibly can. And that's about it. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope all of y'all have an amazing day. Later.